Skydome on Tuesday night. The Ravens and the Redskins getting it going, and of course, the city turns its lonely eyes to the purple for hope at 3-1 with the Redskins visiting. But Brad Gagnon was in Toronto on Tuesday night. He lives there. He covers the National Football League for Bleacher Report. But if you've ever been to his Twitter at Brad_Gagnon, that's Gagnon, you do know he and his lovely girlfriend are both relatively large Toronto Blue Jays. Brad, I tip my cap to you, my Ravens cap and my Orioles shirt to you. That was a hell of a baseball game, right? I mean, you talk about memorable, but from your side of the fence, and you are the first Canadian that I've talked to, I saw the elation of Geddy Lee behind home plate when Encarnacion did the bat flip. You've got to be just as shocked as everyone else that this happened off of Ubaldo Jimenez in the 11th inning, right?
Yeah, I mean, what's funny is that we all talked about this matchup of Lariano and Jimenez, and that being the potential pitching matchup in this game. They were the two hottest pitchers for either team, and obviously Lariano being a lefty facing an Orioles team that struggled this year against lefty pitchers. So it just made sense as the pitching matchup, and then ironically we get that pitching matchup in extra innings after both starters have been used and both bullpens have been burnt, aside from, of course, Zach Britton for Baltimore, and that's another topic entirely. And then
that's a little topic here, as you can imagine. That's only going to be a topic for 6 months here, Brad. That's all.
It is. And
as it should be.
I'm incredibly. I'm very hard on John Gibbons, and I don't think he's a great manager. And I've been pretty vocal about that on Toronto Sports Radio and in Toronto media. And I sat there last night thinking, I don't even think John Gibbons would do this. And so, so the fact that Ubaldo Jimenez, who still was not a very good pitcher for the majority of the year, gave up the season-sealing runs when Zach Britton was in the bullpen is almost inexcusable. I mean, I just don't even understand how that could possibly happen. And if I was an Orioles fan, I'd be extremely upset about that. I mean, you've got to just pull it. I understand you're on the road. You want to be able to close this thing out. You want to be able to get the lead. You trust your offense to give you the lead and then go from there. But you need to get to that point. And I think you need to use all your resources until you run out of them. And you still have more than the Blue Jays in terms of bullpen arms. So, it was rather shocking. I didn't expect it to come down to that. I didn't expect it to go that way. And the Blue Jays are just lucky they were able to finally capitalize. I mean, obviously in the bottom of the ninth, they had a runner in scoring position and nobody out. At that point, it should have been almost like a formula. Like for any team, it should be pretty simple to score when you're in that situation. It's a sacrifice or two, or a timely base hit out of three at bats, and you win the game. And in that case, they had the heart of their order up, and yet they didn't score, and they had to go to extra innings. And so, at that point, they were already in a situation where they should have already won the game. And they had some bad karma with the silly, beer or water that was thrown right next to Kim. And
that doesn't play well, by the way, in Canada, does it? That's not cool there, right? Like that dude is probably going to do a little jail time, right?
I would hope so. I mean, just for the listeners there who think that this is some sort of representation of the Toronto fan base and the people in Canada or Toronto. I mean, Nestor. I mean, the people in Toronto and Canada. That's not us. That's not them. And that was just one silly idiot. And there's the problem is that last year there was the incident with Texas with the beers that were thrown on the field, and this year there was this incident. The two, I don't know if we can draw an obvious connection because this was one solo idiot versus a bunch of idiots, but it's a very discouraging trend. The fact that obviously for some reason Toronto fans feel that they have that that right for some reason. A few of them, it's still a very, very small percentage of them, but still a few of them feeling they have that right. That doesn't really happen in any other ballpark or any other stadium in the United States or Canada.
By the way, I'm shocked that it doesn't happen more, right? I mean, given the amount of alcohol they serve at sporting events all over North America, right? Like, we just don't see that happen much. I mean, you Canadians throw hats onto the ice, but that's usually a celebration.
Yeah, I think that there's a sentiment in this city, and it's probably somewhat BS because I think a lot of other cities should have the same sentiment based on what they've been through. That Toronto's been screwed, quite frequently for decades, whether it be the Leafs going, almost now half a century without a Stanley Cup, whether it be the Raptors going, their first 20 years without doing much at all, whether it be the Blue Jays going that long without, even getting close to the World Series ever since 1993. Well, a lot of other cities have had just as many years, if not more, of bad breaks, bad sports breaks. I mean, look at what's happened in Minnesota and San Diego and what happened in Boston before their recent, rejuvenation in terms of sports success. So you're not alone, Toronto fans. I mean, there's a lot of other cities that have gone through a lot of crap. And so, to begin to think that you guys have been screwed over and over again and everyone else is just loving these, winning championships left and right, and that you need to throw beer cans or water bottles in the field when things aren't going your way in a tie game in that particular situation, which is just ridiculous, is real flawed logic, and it's real problematic. So hopefully it doesn't become a trend, but the fact that it's happened twice now is definitely a little bit...
Well, the way it doesn't become a trend is they put him in jail for about a month, and, the next drunk will think twice before throwing things in Ontario, right? I mean, that's just the way it works, right?
Yeah. Yeah, as long as we're aware of it. I mean, I hope this doesn't just go away. I hope that we're there's a news story that comes out from somebody on what happens to this guy, and we know, so that again, that this isn't, this never happens again, because again,
we had an incident here. I don't know if you're familiar, Brad. We had a Ravens fan beaten by a couple of Raiders fans after the game here on Sunday. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you did. I mean, you're in Canada. It's become an international incident as well. Fan behavior is another thing, but then there's what's happening at the actual field, and the Blue Jays are going down to Dallas, and the Orioles aren't, and we're trying to explain it away here, but for the modern era of a Blue Jays fan, that's about as good as it gets, right? I mean, 3-run walk-off in the 11th inning at home, kind of mirroring the Joe Carter moment for those young folk like yourself that may or may not remember that moment. I was actually sitting in the Sky Dome that night, but how old were you then, Brad? You seem like a young puppy.
I was 7, I guess.
7. But you have a memory of that. Were you awake when Joe Carter hit the home run?
I was like half awake. My mom, I was at a friend of my parents' place, and my mom kind of put me to bed, kind of said, go to sleep, and because I was starting to doze off, and I remember refusing and being in the other room and kind of hearing it all, and then coming back in. It actually applied to both World Series. When they won both World Series, I was like half awake.
I fell asleep in Game 7 in '79. I was 11 years old. My parents let me sleep through that, and it's better because I didn't cry about Willie Stargell. It's better. It's better when you fall asleep when you're under 12, I think, but before you lose a champion. I'm hoping all Orioles kids were asleep last night at 11:40 when the bomb went off there. But for Toronto fans, you
don't appreciate it anyway. You don't appreciate it until you have some scars on you from your sports team. So it's not well appreciated until you're our age.
Well, there is momentum in this, though, right? I mean, in that kind of a home run, that is the type of thing that makes Blue Jays fans want it. That moment. We're still talking about the Delman Young moment here 2 years later. That was the greatest modern moment of Oriole history, right? In the last, for anyone under the age of 40, they remember Delman Young here. I would say that the Encarnacion Blast has got to be right up there with the Joey Bats bat flip. And then before that, to your point, it's been a quarter of a century since Joe Carter. So, Toronto had its moment on Tuesday. Now they have to go navigate the rest of this. Brad Gagnon joining us here from Bleacher Report in Toronto. Believe it or not, he doesn't cover baseball. He just loves baseball. He actually covers the National Football League. And, Brad, I want to get on to the Ravens and the Redskins because that's all we got around here. You guys can go play baseball the rest of the time. We're going to play football now. Ravens struggled with the Raiders over the weekend, but not so much that it should be alarming. It's certainly not alarming to me. What's alarming to me with the Ravens is who's going to run the ball, how are they going to protect Joe Flacco, how are they going to get the offensive line into one cohesive unit where they're not playing backups and injuries and protocol and all the things that went on last week. Losing by a point, not an embarrassment, but certainly worrisome with the Redskins coming here. And as you know, as much as we hate the Blue Jays, Brad, we really hate the Redskins around here.
Yeah, I mean, this is a big one. I mean, it's big in terms of the direction of the team's season and, obviously the hot start. And then, a tough loss, and now your geographic rival comes to town, so I think that this is a very important game for both teams' season. I think, as much as, what happens in early October doesn't necessarily impact you in November and December as much, but this is a big one. This is an important game, and it's a bounce back game for Baltimore. Again, it's a game that they probably could have won. They maybe not should have won. They were down and they were outplayed for much of the day by a pretty good Oakland team, but they probably could have won it. And they came back and obviously took the lead there. And
well, if you have a 6-point lead with 3 minutes left to go at home in Baltimore, you should win. Right, you should win.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, so they should have won. And now they're in a situation where you don't want to drop two straight after a 3-0 start. You don't want to lose to teams like Oakland and Washington and at home nonetheless. And so, yeah, this is big. This is important. And yeah, there are questions this team's facing. I don't think so many on defense. I think giving up, 28 points to the Raiders when you have when Oakland has as many weapons on offense as they do is majorly problematic. I think you're right. The major questions, even though they scored 27, are probably on the offensive side of the ball. And Joe Flacco's thrown, his share of picks the last few years, and he's had a few this year as well, obviously. And there's some inconsistency in terms of who's running the football and who's leading the way in pass protection. So, Steve Smith is the one constant, and that's beautiful. And they've got that going for them against, a Redskins team that has its own question marks. But, I think the Redskins are gaining some momentum, and I think obviously a little bit of air was taken out of Baltimore's tires on Sunday against Oakland. So, this is a big game in terms of, how the season's going to turn one way or the other.
There's some great stories around the NFL. I don't know if there's any better story than the Minnesota Vikings right now, Brad.
No, there isn't. In terms of that defense, in terms of the fact, a team that loses, Teddy Bridgewater, Adrian Peterson, Ryan Khalil, to lose those three key contributors, your left tackle, your quarterback, and your running back, there's no more important three guys on any football team.
By the way, we lost the same guys last year too, right? We lost Steve Smith, Joe Flacco, Justin Forsett, and Terrell Suggs, and look what happened, right? Exactly. You go 5-11 when that happens. Usually you do, yeah. And obviously Minnesota's got a good defense. We all knew Minnesota had a good defense coming in, but I don't think any of us realized quite how good it had become. And that's Mike Zimmer. That's a very well-coached team, but that's just a team that's greater than the sum of its parts. I think there are a lot of people across this, that country and this country, United States and Canada and anywhere else, who can't name more than a guy or two on that defense. Still, even probably before the season, definitely not. I think most could probably come up with Harrison Smith and maybe Linval Joseph, Anthony Barr is probably a guy that will come to most people's name because he was a top pick. Well, Barr's their best player, based on what I saw on Monday night.
Yeah, he is. I think so, too. But, generally, it's not like that D that's, loaded up with, first-round picks that everyone knows or Pro Bowlers. It's a D that's greater than the sum of its parts. And Harrison Smith is fantastic in the secondary. He's well supported by Terrence Newman, Captain Marlin, Trey Waynes. And then you've got Barr in the linebacking core. And then up front, you've got Everson Griffin and Linval Joseph. And so it's all three layers. It's deep. If they lose a guy, they're not going to, they can replace them generally because they have so much talent in other spots. They're going to do damage all season long. And so far, the numbers are, pretty much as good as it gets. And they should roll for the majority of this season with that. So the only question is, can Sam Bradford keep it up, right? Can he stay healthy and can he remain relatively consistent? Because that's what you need from him, of course. You can't win these days unless you're the Denver Broncos, the biggest exception to the rule, without decent quarterback play.
The AFC's been a little chalky, right? With Denver and Pittsburgh and the Ravens and certainly New England, sort of the usual suspects other than the Colts. But in the NFC, it's upside down, man. Arizona and Carolina look like their season's on the brink. Both their quarterbacks in trouble. And here come the Philadelphia Eagles to join the Minnesota Vikings. Eagles have a nice game this week as well in Detroit, where they're clearly having some problems right now. And then there's the whole trend of these young quarterbacks who are just playing lights out right now when Wentz being the leader in the clubhouse for all of that.
Yeah, I mean, no one expected this in Philadelphia. I will admit, I was on Twitter saying it. I thought the Eagles were going to have a terrible season because I thought, this is the borderline throwing in the towel by starting a guy who threw 24 passes in the preseason, was considered raw and probably not ready for the NFL when he was
Well, that's what happens
drafted.
when you're in North Dakota State. They make jokes about that. They just do, right?
Exactly.
Until proven. I mean, they made fun of Flacco until he won the Super Bowl because they're like, Delaware, is that even a state? I mean, that's what goes on when you go to a small school. You get discounted, and that may play into their favor, especially if they look as good as Carson Wentz does right now.
Well, it's played into their favor thus far, mainly because there's no one who's seen anything the guy's done. I mean, obviously there's tape. They filmed those games at North Dakota State, but they weren't quite as exposed as your typical Division I quarterback, and that was the case with Joe Flacco, nearly a decade ago now, and it's definitely the case here. And so I do wonder, as more tape emerges on him based on what he does on the field in these games for the Eagles, if defensive coordinators who are very good at their jobs are going to start to figure him out a little bit. That's possible, but the Eagles have a lot of talent. They're not like a team that can't survive that. They can't ride that, the struggles that Carson Wentz is inevitably going to encounter at some point this season. It's not just going to be all what we see in the first 3 weeks for the Eagles. So, there's going to be trouble. They're going to struggle, and they have to ride through that. The advantage they have is their defense is stacked with very good talent and has only given up 27 points in 3 games to, the Browns and Bears is one thing, but then to the Steelers to give up only a field goal headed into your bye week. And now, you mentioned they got a couple tough ones with Detroit and Washington on the road.
By the way, that's the power of Jimmy Schwartz of Baltimore, Maryland there on that Eagles defense. I've never had any use for the Eagles, but, I got a little soft spot for him this year because Jimmy's on the sidelines, running around out there with the red hat. I mean, that team's playing defense, period.
I think that's a big factor. I think Jim deserves a ton of credit because this is a team that's actually been pretty similar for several years. Some of the same names we've heard for years now for this D, and yet, this year's the year where it's all coming together. Again, it's only 3 games. It's not even a quarter of the season for Philadelphia. Things can still hit the fan. But right now, I mean, I don't think you put them on Minnesota's level quite yet, even though the point differential and the record indicates they should be. But if they can survive this road trip, they're probably the favorite to win the NFC East and make a run.
He is Brad Gagnon. He covers the National Football League for Bleacher Report and lives and hails from Toronto, Canada, where the victors got the spoils on Tuesday night. And Mr. Angelos denying me a press pass allowed me to, save a little bit of gas money, get a little extra sleep on Tuesday night, and the heartache feels just the same all week and all off season. Brad, last thing for you, man. I know the Maple Leafs can't win the Stanley Cup this year, but for your Blue Jays, and jumping off of where Tuesday night was, this is a pretty feel-good team right now going down to Texas. We know momentum plays such a huge factor. Do you expect the Blue Jays to make the World Series here in 2 weeks?
I don't expect anything at this point, and honestly, we're almost at the point now with this team that I think that Baltimore, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but might have been almost at in this prior to this game on Tuesday night. It's almost a little bit of house money. I mean, they collapsed in September, the Blue Jays did, and the batting hasn't been right, and the offense hasn't been right, and it really wasn't even right on Tuesday. And so, if they lose now, I think a lot of folks are thinking, oh man, they're even lucky they were there. But they are. The thing about Texas is they're a very overrated baseball team. I mean, they're running into a team that, Pythagorean wins should have only won 81 games this season. They scored 8 more runs than they allowed, despite finishing with the best record in the American League. And so,
playing against lesser competition, too. I mean, there was a lot of Oakland, a lot of Anaheim going on in there. And, Seattle and Houston stunk for most of the year, too, which is why they're not in the tournament.
Yeah, I mean, our 2 teams, Baltimore and Toronto, as much as they didn't have better, usually you say the wild cards get screwed when they have better records than teams in other divisions that won. That's not the case this year, but it almost feels the same way because, again, they're beating up on the Minnesotas and the Angels of the world and all these weak teams, whereas there was no one. I mean, even Tampa puts up a fight, at least against the Jays, not so much against Baltimore this year. But, so essentially, what I'm saying is I don't expect anything. I highly doubt it because I just don't think the offense is doing enough and for now over a month, to kind of sustain something in the postseason. But if they get hot on that side of the ball, yeah, absolutely. I think they have the major pitching advantage against Texas and probably even against Boston and Boston or Cleveland. And so, they could do it. They can definitely beat Texas. I think they'd be in a lot of trouble against a Cleveland or Boston team on the road in the ALCS, though.
He is Brad_Gagnon, that's Gagnon, from the fighting city of Toronto, Canada, where I did not present my passport on Tuesday, and I did not enter or leave the country, but I'll get back to Canada soon. I love your country, you know that. Hockey will bring me back at some point. I want to come see the Caps play the Leafs at the Air Canada Centre at some point, the ACC. Last time I was up there was for the Rolling Stones. So, hey, man, I got plenty of extra time now in the fall. Brad, enjoy the baseball this weekend at Texas. We'll be watching and crying and probably still bitching about Buck Showalter and Ubaldo Jimenez and Zach Britton.
Man, Jays and the Orioles will see each other plenty next year, and I'm sure that it's going to be a fun rivalry for years to come. So it was enjoyable, and I did feel for you guys last night.
April 3rd is opening day, and we play the Toronto Blue Jays to start the season next year. So a little lesson. So you'll hear from me again, Gagnon. This war is not over with. Hey, great having you on, man. Be well.
Thanks, man.
All right, man. He is the National Football League correspondent from Toronto, Canada for Bleacher Report. He is Brad Gagnon, one of our defending champions and pals around here talking some Blue Jays baseball. He's all Blue Jays up, Okay, Blue Jays, let's play ball. Oh. The Buy a Toyota Audio Vault's there 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world. By downloading the TuneIn Radio app, we come in crystal clear, even in Canada. It's true. We go everywhere your mobile device goes. Our morning newspaper reaches your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning, and it's powered up by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. Last but never least, breaking news happens first on the WNST Tech Service. That is brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And Dennis Colatsas will be here on Thursday from 3 until 5, driving you home. It is the SSV on WNST. There'll be some Ubaldo residue and certainly lots of enthusiasm for the Ravens and the Redskins this weekend. Tuesday night, CJ Mosley will be with us at Buffalo Wild Wings, swabbing for the Bone Marrow Registry, and for There Goes My Hero. We will see you there on Monday for Best Seat in the House, and on Tuesday with CJ Mosley. I have a feeling it'll have a better and happier ending than this past Tuesday did when Ubaldo Jimenez lit up the Canadian sky. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports. ST Towson to self-soothe here for a long, long time after Tuesday night's meltdown at Skydome in Toronto. Meanwhile, we have the Ravens hosting the Redskins this weekend, kicking their ass will make us all feel a lot better around here. And certainly the undefeated Terps also turning their lonely eyes up to State College to take on Penn State this weekend. Another pretty good matchup. So there are other things we could watch, but we would prefer to be in Arlington, Texas right now, talking about the Texas Rangers. This guy is headed instead to the land of Cleve and the Indians and the Red Sox. He is a Sports Illustrated insider and columnist on things Major League Baseball and sports in general. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at Ben Reiter. That's Reiter from SI.com and Sports Illustrated. Ben, I've talked to a lot of people about this, and not just on the internet. The Buck Showalter decision on Tuesday night is as spectacularly controversial and has such a long tail of conversation as to any other way they could have possibly have lost. They lost with Ubaldo Jimenez giving up a meatball 3-run home run in extra innings with Zach Britton on the bench. Ben, it's inexplicable from us, but please try to explain it to us.
Well, Nestor, I've never seen anything like what happened on Tuesday night. What I really mean is the way that the narrative around this game started to coalesce even as the game was still going on, right? Especially if you were following on Twitter. After a while, as you got into the 9th inning, then the 10th, especially the 11th, basically the only thing you were seeing on social media is where's Britton? Where's Britton?
Well, you were seeing, is Britton hurt? Yeah, I mean,
what's going on?
Yeah,
nobody could figure it out. Okay, and look, it was a mistake. Clearly, in retrospect, it was a mistake, especially not using Zach Britton in high leverage situations, right? If these guys were sailing through the innings, especially in the 11th, and you got Dunsing followed by Jimenez, all right, fine. But once you have guys on first and third with one out against Ubaldo Jimenez, that's the time that you say, you know what, this is it. This is do or die, win or go home. It's time for our best guy, all right? That's, I think, the mistake. However, I think you have to understand where Showalter was coming from. I don't think that it was 100% sure thing that Zach Britton would have gotten these outs. Obviously, the probability is much, much greater given his track record. But you can't say, oh, if only he would have put in Zach Britton, the result would have come out differently. Also, there is something to what Showalter was saying about what are we going to do then, right? Okay, so Zach Britton gets out of the inning. You still need to close out the Blue Jays, and you're still probably going to see Ubaldo Jimenez or Brian Dunsing or some combination of less palatable relievers, okay? Perhaps the leverage would have been lower. Yes, he should have used Britton. It hurts, and it'll hurt forever that we didn't see Zach Britton in this game. But, man, you don't know what would have happened. And this was not a sure thing, even had Britton gotten out of it. You know, it's quite possible that Jimenez, as good as he's been recently, would have given up that home run in the bottom of whatever inning he would have come in after Britton had already been burnt.
Yeah, I don't know if we have enough goat horns around here, Ben, for everyone that deserves them from the team at this point. I would say the goat horn should go to everyone in the lineup that went 3 turns around the lineup the last 7 innings of the game without hitting the baseball, right? I mean, they didn't have base runners, which has been the problem for the Orioles. I mean, they put together a beer league softball team that on an October night was a beer league softball team. They were either going to hit a home run to win it. I mean, I saw Wieters in there in the 9th inning swinging from his heels. Clearly, the word is out. You don't have to throw any of these guys strikes to have them off at it. And that catches up in the end when they might have played 16, 17 innings without ever getting a base runner because they weren't going to get a base runner. They were going to hit a solo home run. They certainly weren't going to draw a walk, right? I mean, that much is clear. There was no way any Oriole player was going to go up and take 4 pitches to get to first base. So, the overall sloppiness of all of this is how many innings if Britton would have gone 2 more innings, okay, great. Britton pitches the 11th and the 12th, and Ubaldo comes in the 13th. Who's going to hit the game-winning home run on the 11th or the 12th for the Orioles? It wasn't trending in that direction from an offensive standpoint either.
Right, and the Blue Jays bullpen has been their weak point for a while now. But here we have Brett Cecil shutting down the Orioles' bats, Jason Grilli shutting down the Orioles' bats, Roberto Osuna doing the same. Francisco Liriano coming in and getting 5 big outs. Yeah, you're right. This team was not hitting, Like, the story of this game forever and ever and ever will be Buck didn't use Britton. That's oversimplified. That's all I'm saying. Yeah, he should have used Britton probably. But, Buck plus Britton does not necessarily equal win in this game. In fact, given the way things are trending, I think it probably doesn't. So kill Buck all you want. But all I'm saying is there was more going on here, and their backs were against the wall when it got to that point in the game, no matter what the manager did strategically.
He is Ben Reiter. He covers all things baseball and sports at Sports Illustrated. You can follow his journey, and thousands do, at Ben Reiter. That's Reiter, out on Twitter. For the Orioles and picking up the pieces here in the offseason now, Wieters, clearly Trumbo hit a big bomb on Tuesday night. This team's not coming back like this in April, right? I mean, we know that, and there will be incredible questions about the $12 million they still owe Jimenez, the $11 million they still owe Gallardo. Who will be their 5-man rotation next year, and where they are with the Tyler Wilsons and the Mike Wrights, amongst other guys, and obviously Fowler, who they thought they were going to get last offseason, and now Michael Bourne hitting the market, and he turned out to be a nice little pickup for them at the end of the year. But there's going to be tumult in this offseason because this isn't easy to do, to win 90 games and put yourself in a position to be playing baseball this weekend. This doesn't come naturally around here in Baltimore. We still relish these postseason opportunities because we spent 2 decades without having any of them.
I think that's exactly right. I mean, the Orioles were a really impressive team to me this season. Kind of the one member of the playoffs that I couldn't exactly figure out how they got there. I know they hit a lot of home runs. We know that. Scored 52% of their runs off of homers. Okay, so that's that. but it's not like they were leading the league in runs overall, right? And it's not like their pitching staff was much to talk about outside of Britain and maybe a couple of others. This is really a team that just grinded out a playoff appearance. And I think that no matter how it ended, you have to appreciate that. And yes, there's going to be some tumult going forward, as you say, but I think there are some positives to take going forward. Primarily that these pitchers that you've been waiting for years and years and years, specifically Kevin Gausman and Dylan Bundy, showed this year that they can be at least, partially what everybody has thought they'd be for so long.
Well, toward the top of the rotation, right? I mean, not Porcello yet, but you have a feeling at some point Gausman can be a 20-game winner. Bundy, if he gets stronger, gets better, these are young guys, they can be 20-game winners. Time will tell. I mean, I would say that for sure in April, at least, those are two question marks that this past April we will feel okay on opening day if Tillman, Gausman, and Bundy are healthy and can take the ball on April 1st. That will bode well for the 17 Orioles. I would agree with that.
Absolutely. And it also kind of shows something, perhaps suggests something even deeper about the organization, which is that this organization, the rap against it, for, a decade now, is they can't develop starting pitchers. Well, now maybe they can. So maybe that'll put that to rest as well.
Well, we developed Jake Arrieta. We did a nice job there. You got to admit that.
Well, you developed him pretty well for the Cubs. That's true.
Ben, you're headed to Cleveland and Boston right now, and, this is a good tournament all the way around. I love the National League side of this thing, too. These are the best teams. There's a lot of good pitching. Most of these teams have 2, if not 3, really top-of-the-rotation guys. If you gave me $1 right now, and I have a friend fetching me some tickets for some World Series games at Major League Baseball right now, and I've requested tickets at Fenway and Wrigley because I'm kind of expecting that's where it's going to be. That my betting money says I like the Red Sox, and I like the Red Sox because I don't like the Indians, and it's nothing against Tito or where they are. I don't like injured teams this time of the year. That's why I don't like the Nationals. I think when you're banged up, this is the wrong sport, the wrong time of the year to not have your catcher, to not have your number 2 starter, to say that your number 2 starter is going to take the ball, but he's a little banged up. Cleveland's too depleted for me to like them.
You're right, and that's certainly the knock against both of those teams. I'd be careful, though, with each of these teams, the Indians and the Nationals. You look at them, they look wounded. The Indians in particular, without their number 1 starter and their number 2 starter, and really their best hitter, it's been the case all season, in Michael Brantley. But this is a team that can surprise you, and it can surprise you with unexpected guys, I still think that most people, most casual baseball fans across the country probably don't even really know who Jose Ramirez is, at least don't know much about him, the Indians' third baseman. This guy was quietly one of the best offensive players in the league this year. He hit .312, 81 ribbies, 22 steals, hit 11 homers, but a whole lot of doubles and other extra base hits. A guy like this, I'm not going to say that he has the potential. Well, I will say this. He has the potential to be Daniel Murphy-like in a series, okay? I don't think he's going to hit home runs in 6 straight games, but this is a guy who can have his coming out party on the national stage. And look, these 5-game series, best of 5s, it's just one game here or there that can really swing them, right?
Well, that really is the treacherous part of this, right?
That wins them.
Yeah, the better team doesn't win because it is 5 games and not 7, right? I mean, that makes this treacherous for the Cubs as well this week, who, just think they're going to be printing World Series tickets. I don't think it's going to come that easy. I don't think it's going to come easy for any of these teams. I mean, Texas has been the best team in the American League, beating up on bad competition, but their run differential will show you that they're nothing special. And Toronto now has all the momentum going down to Texas.
You're right. No, I don't think the Cubs should be punching their ticket to the NLCS yet, and I don't think they are. We'll see what happens with them. But yeah, I mean, I think that any of these teams, any of these series can easily be an upset. Even the lopsided one, or at least the ones that look lopsided, like Red Sox, Indians, and Nationals, Dodgers. I mean, the Nationals also have one of these guys I'm looking at as a potential offensive player who could just take over the series, and that's the rookie Trey Turner. I mean, what a revelation he's been. Everybody knows about the speed, and, he stole 30 bases in about 73 games. But he also hit 11 bombs in 73 games. This guy is an electric player at the top of that lineup. He could do a whole lot of damage himself and make up for the absence of guys like Wilson Ramos and Steven Strasburg.
Yeah, it's funny. We always talk about pitching in October and pitching wins. I love the Red Sox offense because they scattered around, they all hit the ball well. And the one thing that I saw with the Orioles on Tuesday, and I was tweeting about it, the Orioles have all year had, after maybe May, have had horrific at-bats through course of the lineup. You know, if you look at 27 outs, 15 to 18 in every game, you would look at those outs and say that was a really poor at bat. And when you start stacking poor at bats up, the Red Sox rarely have anyone have a poor at bat. And I think especially against good pitchers that are going to challenge you, that are generally going to be throwing strikes anyway, I like the Red Sox offense to come to life here this month. That's why I like them in the American League side of the bracket.
Yeah, I mean, I do too, to be frank. I actually think they're a better team than the Cubs, really.
Well, in September they were. I mean, but the Cubs had nothing to play for.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think overall, if you match, like, the offense is relentless, but they do everything. They steal bases, and they do so at a very efficient clip. They play great defense. The pitching's really come around, especially in the bullpen. Give experience whatever credit you want, but they certainly have guys, especially in Ortiz and Pedroia, who've done this before. For me, the Red Sox are the favorite right now. Probably the Cubs as a close second, but they're also a real tough matchup if that's what the World Series ends up being. Just because if you are to look at a couple weaknesses of the Cubs, one is really holding base runners down. All 5 of their starters were in the top 30 in baseball in stolen bases allowed. And these Red Sox can hit the ball a long way, but they can also run.
Ben Reiter joining us here from Sports Illustrated. He will be at Cleveland and Boston all week long, covering that. And you can follow his journey at SI.com as well as at Ben Reiter. That's REITER. Ben, last thing for you as we go into this offseason, this is a Baltimore perspective, right? Trumbo's going to enter the market. Wieters will find out, where all these – but the market is different, right? Like there's no one out there that is going to be that $250 million guy getting chased this year the way we wondered about Chris Davis in the offseason. This isn't a great offseason to improve your team through free agency. Some would say that's never a great time, but if all these teams have plenty of money, there just aren't great players to augment franchises in this particular offseason. It's going to be kind of quiet, I think.
I think you're absolutely right. And Nestor, every year for almost the past decade, I've ranked the top 50 free agents for SI.com heading into the offseason. Last season was the strongest class I've done. This offseason is probably the weakest, especially now that Wilson Ramos is, hurt not just himself, but his free agent stock by tearing up his knee. Cespedes is clearly the top of the market. You're looking at a couple of closers in Aroldis Chapman and Kenley Jansen, a couple of Blue Jays sluggers in Encarnacion and Jose Bautista.
And I bet they don't get as much money as they think they're going to get. I mean, Davis,
up there in age.
Trumbo's going to find that out too, right? I mean,
right, exactly. You got Trumbo. I mean, so there's some pieces, but as far as the Orioles, I think you're right. I don't think that we're going to see them be overly active in this market, and I don't think they should be given their makeup and kind of, as you say, some of the less positive contracts they still have to pay out.
Ben, great having you on, man. I appreciate it. Enjoy the baseball. Our season's over here, Ben, but it is football season, and we get to beat the Redskins this week, and we get to beat Penn State this week, so there is that going on around here. But it was a long season, and I think for any Oriole fan, if you look yourself in the eye and talk about the possibility of that particular team winning a World Series, Ben, it was kind of far-fetched. I wasn't making World Series plans for the Orioles. I thought that they were kind of – it's sad that they lost the way they did with their best pitcher sitting on the bullpen taking the pine, but I didn't think they were comprised to win a championship with that offense.
I didn't think so either. I think they overachieved, and I'm not saying that in a negative way at all. And, if you're going to kill Buck Showalter for what he did or did not do last night, I think you also have to kind of give him credit for leading a team that probably did better than anyone expected.
Ben, great having you on, man. Enjoy the baseball this weekend. We'll be watching, too.
Thanks, Nestor.
You got it. Ben Reiter, you can follow his journey out at Sports Illustrated and SI.com, as well as at Ben Reiter, Reiter. He loves the game of baseball, and don't we all? You can find me out in the Bahia Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear. Our morning newspaper reaches your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning, and that is powered up by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. Last but never least, breaking news happens first on the WNST Tech Service. That is brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis will be here on Thursday driving you home, getting you ready for Redskins and Ravens. We turn our lonely eyes back to the purple now as the Orioles try to pick up the pieces from just an inconceivable exit to the playoffs late into the night on Tuesday night when Ubaldo went boom. Nasty at WNST.net reaches me. Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on Facebook Live as well as on our YouTube WNSTV channel. Don't forget, Tuesday night, CJ Mosley will be joining us for the Bone Marrow Registry at Buffalo Wild Wings in Owings Mills, doing a special one-night show there. That is Tuesday night. We'll also be there Monday night for Best Seat in the House as well as our wing eating competition. We love our Buffalo Wild Wings in Owings Mills. I have some dark memories from around midnight on Tuesday night, but I did have a really nice nacho ice cream, man. A little Mexican, big globs of ice cream and caramel and chocolate and the nachos and the cheesecake fry. It was nice. And then they lost. Hey, I met Springsteen last week. I'm still in a good mood. I'm still living off that. We are WNST.net AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.